Welcome to Spoiler Alert, where we talk about and spoil the shows you're obsessed with. This week, Matt Mitovich and I post-mortem the finales of Homeland and Dexter.
Surprise, motherf***.
We critique the very happy ending of Gossip Girl. We preview the arrival of Hook on Once Upon a Time. And we ask ourselves, did Grey's Anatomy just air the best episode of the season? Hello, Matt.
How are you?
Good. So, Homeland.
Brody did not die.
He did not die.
That was some of the conventional wisdom that how does the show move forward without him paying for his sins.
But is he off the show? That's the big question.
Yeah.
Are we moving into Homeland 2.0 where it's just more focused on Carrie?
And if he is back, which I have to assume he will be, I mean, he's an Emmy winner. It's just like, as much as it makes sense narratively to write off the character, you want to keep as many of those pieces together as possible. But what would season 3 look like?
We just following him on the run?
Are we going to get a lot of BlackBerry video chats between him and Carrie?
I don't think so. I mean, to me, that final scene between them felt like a goodbye.
We came so close.
It can still happen. One day.
It felt like they didn't want to admit that this was probably the last time they're going to see each other. And I feel like the producers must have had some sense about that this was going to be the last time they're going to see each other, at least for a long time.
I was not expecting another terrorist attack. That caught me by surprise.
Caught me by surprise too, and I have to tell you how chilling it was that split second when he was like,
Somebody move my car.
and I was already like on the edge of my seat waiting for something to happen, and in that moment it was like, wow.
The question some people have is Brody still somehow responsible, involved in that?
Well, it's interesting that this far into the show, that still remained a question very much in the finale.
Mm-hmm.
Did he plan this all along? I think at this point, it seems pretty obvious that he did not.
Why point out that his car had been moved if he knew that was the plan?
Well, who did move the car?
Surprise, motherf***.
You know, it's interesting, at the end, when we didn't know what language Saul was speaking, everybody was like, oh my God, he's the mole, he's talking Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
We since found out it was a Hebrew,
The Hebrew prayer, yeah.
Saul isn't the mole, but who is? Who moved the car?
I had a thought for a second when Saul's wife called. I was like, she's acting a little moly. You know, all of a sudden she's back in the picture.
Yeah, and it was random just how all of a sudden she popped up.
There's these nondescript people moving around behind her. There's this heightened level of anxiety in her voice. One of the first questions out of her mouth is,
Is Carrie, is she all right?
I'm glad they didn't pull that at the last minute, you know, oh my God, this person's the mole. As cool of a twist it would be to have Saul speaking Arabic, I feel like that is more of 24's territory to pull that kind of last second stunt. You know, Homeland's obviously a much different show, and I think the fact that Saul standing around all those dead bodies with Carrie walking in was a much more powerful image.
and yet it made so much sense because he had arranged for himself to be off-site at the time.
Well, and you've been talking about Saul being the mole since the beginning of the season, when
Yeah,
he came upon all that intelligence.
What's Carrie's explanation going to be for why she wasn't there and why she disappeared for a couple days
Well, she's got
afterward?
some explaining to do.
Yeah.
Speaking of people who have some explaining to do, Deb just shot her boss on Dexter. Solid episode, an end to a really much improved season.
A much improved season. It was so tight.
So
And
tight.
The writing was really smart. The fact that Dex outsmarted LaGuardia at the very end.
And I also like that a lot of the characters, they stepped up their game and they were smarter. I felt like my big complaint about last season was Deb was so dumb. She was so blind to everything that was happening in front of her. This season, she was like a step ahead of Dexter, which was exciting to see. And Jennifer Carpenter just nailed it.
She really did.
Had a couple quibbles with the finale, though.
Well, let's talk about dumb characters. There's no reason why LaGuardia would have gone to that storage container alone. I don't care what she was told on the phone, she does not go there alone.
The second thing is, why was she egging Deb on to shoot Dexter?
Do it, Deborah. Shoot him. Do it. Shoot him.
She could have just as easily said, turn him in. Why was she making it such a clear-cut choice? You either shoot me or you shoot Dexter. There were a lot of other options there. It didn't have to be so black and white.
And that's not how I end the finale. I wouldn't have ended it after the gunshot. I would have cut away before the gunshot, just to be cheap and whorish.
Right.
But, you know, make people wonder, well, is she going to shoot anybody? Or, you know, put a gun within LaGuardia's reach and then, you know, pull out of the container and have a gunshot go off. Who shot who?
Right.
Because, you know, you could say, well, no one would shoot Dexter. He's the star of the show. They've got another season to go. But, you know, maybe he doesn't get killed or something.
I actually found it completely out of character and slightly preposterous that Deb would have killed LaGuardia.
It opens up so many problems for the character next season.
I don't know how you redeem her. She's a murderer. She's a murderer. She's a cop killer. How is she going to step foot back in Miami Metro?
Yeah, she doesn't have any code that she goes by.
Right.
Is the law just something that you make up as you go along?
I don't understand how you redeem a character like that. And maybe that's not the point. Maybe she's going to turn into some serial killer with Dexter. And also another issue I had was I don't believe, or I wasn't buying Hannah's confession that she poisoned Deb's drink.
How did Deb not stage this whole thing? How
Right.
did she not
Well, that's what everybody
frame her?
thought going in.
Yeah.
Right. And that would have made a lot more sense than Hannah, who is this seasoned serial killer who admittedly, she said,
I don't
never
make
slipped
mistakes.
up.
Yeah, I don't
Why
make
would
mistakes.
her one mistake be would arguably be her most important kill ever?
Right.
That said, still very much on board with Dexter this past
Yeah.
season. I do hope next season is the last season.
Yep.
I don't really think they can stretch this franchise out too much longer now, especially with Dib's a murderer. You have some Once Upon a Time scoop for
Yeah, I was
us.
up in Vancouver recently, and I met up with a bunch of the Once Upon a Time
saw the
cast.
photos.
And coming out of the mid-season finale, one of the big questions is we saw Captain Hook arriving in Maine on his big ship, with Cor at his side. So I asked Colin O'Donoghue, what sort of welcome does Captain Hook get?
Hook obviously wants to get his revenge on Rumpelstiltskin, and that's sort of his overriding MO is to do that. And whereas Cora has a slightly different agenda, and it's about finding the balance. Hook is trying to find the balance as to how he goes about doing that. Now, when he arrives in Storybrooke, he doesn't have much interaction with the people of Storybrooke straight off. So he's kind of stealthy, I guess, in how he goes about his business. Plus, he realizes that magic is in Storybrooke pretty early on, so therefore Rumpel is still very, very powerful. So he has to be careful about how he goes about trying to get his revenge.
So he raises a good point. Hook was led to Storybrooke thinking that there's no magic in play and that he and Rumpel would be their equals, but in fact that is not the case. So he might be in for an ass whooping.
Gossip Girl ended its run with a very sort of happy ending. No huge surprises on the romance front.
However,
Chuck and Blair married with a child.
You may kiss the bride.
Dan and Serena married in the flash forward, or getting married when we last saw them. Obviously the big twist though, Dan is Gossip Girl.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Makes no sense, preposterous, out of character.
I mean, we always knew it was one of us, right?
I always thought it was Dorota.
However, willing to suspend disbelief on this one.
it's better than it being Dorota, which would have been
Totally.
so easy and expected.
It would have been a
and
cheat.
People would have shrugged.
And they did, at least to their credit, take a few minutes to try to explain and go back through time.
I've screwed up, right? Plenty of times. But I've always tried to do the right thing.
Because there's a whole thing about the horrible things that Gossip Girl did to Jenny, who's Dan's sister. But so they took time to sort of explain that, so I got to give them props for that. They didn't just drop this bomb and then move on.
I'm wondering if the long hair that Dan had last season was kind of a clue, a little foreshadowing, girly hair, Gossip Girl.
I think you're onto something. Overall, I liked the finale, but it was an end to a very disappointing final season, in my opinion. They probably could have done 4 or 5 episodes and wrapped it up. They didn't need 10.
There's a little something for everybody.
There you go. Lastly, Grey's Anatomy. I thought it was the best episode of the season last week. So many great moments, some of them quiet. I love the Derek Meredith scene where she came and visited him at the hospital bed. Nothing really happened there, but it just felt like you believed that these two were husband and wife for a long time.
We got the nice Christina Owen reunion, which has been long in the making, and it was definitely a good payoff there.
Question is, will the reunion stick? I remember Shonda Rhimes said it's going to be a rough go for them, but they will get to a better place later in the season. But there's that whole issue of she still doesn't want kids and he does. I don't know how you overcome that.
I thought the one weak link in the episode was the whole Bailey wedding jitters, craziness. Would Bailey really bail on her wedding just to tend to Adele when there's, a hospital full of doctors?
Not to get too
there?
superficial, but if Bailey had any jitters, all she has to do is look at the guy and say, okay, no jitters.
Yeah.
I'll marry you for life. I didn't buy why she was having all of this doubt.
2 great things came out of the wedding storyline, though. One was the Cali, Arizona scene.
Great. Where you were wanted to stand up and applaud when she was giving that speech.
Yeah.
I was.
I haven't had sex in 5 months because of the leg. Enough about the leg.
I like that they've gotten to this point that they're starting to get back together and, get rid of that tension, because that's never any fun. But then also we got to see some of the people cleaned up. Some of the interns and see
Dramatic makeovers.
Yeah, it was like the makeover episode.
It was almost campy.
Yeah.
Some of it when they were just coming out and they were just like stunning.
Who do you think would be a keeper going into the later half of the season, maybe next season, out of the interns?
Wilson, Karev's future love interest, Camilla Luddington.
Who's like one of the most beautiful women on television right now.
Clearly they have big plans for her,
Yeah.
and clearly those plans involve Karev.
They've
She
given
has
her
to
this
be
whole
the love
interesting
interest.
backstory.
Yeah.
They got the great thing with Karev.
Gaius Charles, I have to think, is a keeper, mostly because it's Gaius Charles.
Plus, I really enjoyed the storyline you had a couple weeks ago with Kepner. It was
Actually, I'm hearing they could be pursuing a love story there between the two of them.
and of course, we love Tina Majorino, but
Just landed a pilot.
Yeah.
Which, being Tina Majorino, if you're going to bring her on as recurring, it's a risk. That's the risk Bones took. They knew that, she could be snapped up by someone else.
Those 3, I think, are keepers in that order.
You're right.
Thank you, Matt.
Always a pleasure.
While the credits roll, we're going to discuss what we got Megan Masters for Christmas.
Oh, cool.
Nothing? Nothing.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Hi, I'm Allison Brie.
And I'm Joel McHale.
And subscribe to ENT-TV.
It's just ENTV for all your entertainment news.
No, it's EENTV.
It's just ENTV, so whatever.
It's ENENTEVE. Unless it conflicts with anything, channel or company we work for. I'm Allison Brie.
Signing off.